righty, a few weeks back we had an unplanned conversation with a couple of fathers, and then lots of texts and emails who were in touch regarding the Gardasil vaccine. And those calls prompted calls from other people, about 20 parents who also had concerns about Gardasil. I moved on very quickly to other topics. I didn't get an opportunity really to delve into it as much as I wanted to. It's very much impromptu at the time, as this program is. Some would call it organic. It moves along with calls and stories and life stories from you guys, the members of the public. So we didn't return to many of them, and we didn't return to many of the texts and emails regarding it. But we did get some contact from one or two different organisations. Amongst them at the time was the Irish Cancer Society, who wanted to just give their opinion. And I think in their own words, to introduce an element of balance into the story. Just ahead of that, by way of illustration of some of the texts and emails that I received, can't come on the air as I'm at work, but my daughter received the vaccine last week, and I'm so worried as she had to take the complete day off the day after. She's only 13. Her arms were totally dead the following day, and she was completely drained from it. She sleeps. She's been sleeping most of the weekend. This has really started to worry me now after hearing the fathers and stories on air. My daughter received the Gardasil vaccine 5 years ago. She ended up with a brain injury, which is a rare autoimmune disease, an inflammation in the brain that attacks the nervous system. This is triggered by a vaccination. My daughter nearly died from this. She spent 3.5 months in the CUH and 3 months in the National Rehab Hospital learning to walk and talk. She is still left with side effects. She did a lot of training to help her get back her strength in her hand and leg with Tony Martin, the instructor in Blackpool. Our 13-year-old daughter received the vaccine last year and had all of the symptoms that man's daughter on the air had. Last week we got notified that the booster was being given, and I stopped her getting the booster. Our eldest daughter is 19 now with thyroid problems. After her vaccination, and it's only now we realised it had to do with the vaccination. My daughter had the MMR at 21 months. She developed chronic diarrhea and autistic traits after the vaccination for MMR. Chronic hyperactivity, no speech, and is now completely lost in her own world. We couldn't get the diarrhea under control for 2.5 years, but recently started the gut and psychological diet, and it seems to be helping. A huge thank you for allowing parents the platform to highlight the tragic outcomes from this horrific vaccine, Neil. Thank you so much. Another one. Since getting the Gardasil vaccine, my daughter has developed thyroiditis and been diagnosed with premature ovarian failure at the age of 16. My daughter is still sick 19 months after this vaccine. 1 dose, and she had a seizure while the nurses were still there. They didn't know what to do, apart from cover it up. Another one. If a person has a smear test done, HPV will never turn into cervical cancer. It takes up to 10 years and no smears to leave it undetected to allow it to develop into cervical cancer. Lower the age for cervical smears and cervical checks. Get rid of Gardasil. Neil, did you know that there are over 30 vaccines scheduled from birth through to the start of secondary school? And that doesn't even include Gardasil. Another one here. Gardasil is banned in Canada and Austria. My daughter got POTS syndrome after 2 sessions of Gardasil. And the HSE in Cork told us not to give her a 3rd jab because there is a direct link between Gardasil and POTS syndrome. And listen, you know, that's just a handful. I've got pages and pages of these. But with that in mind, Dr. Robert O'Connor is head of research at the Irish Cancer Society. Dr. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me on the show.
Not at all. As a parent, I'd be worried, and I'd be very worried as a society when I see texts and comments and emails and stories like this coming across my desk, to be honest with you. What have you got to say about all of those?
I'm a parent of a teenager myself, so I share the same concerns as every one of your listeners who are parents, and for the broader society. But this is an absolutely safe vaccine, and it is absolutely vital in helping prevent a number of forms of cancer. This year, 100 women will die from cervical cancer. With all of the resources and everything else that we have, 100 women will die. Those are sisters, mothers, daughters of people all around us in our community. Now, that's a stark figure, but actually the amount of people impacted by HPV cancers and pre-cancers is 6,100 people each year. All of that would be prevented if we had an effective HPV vaccination program that had a high take-up rate in Ireland.
But it also would be prevented if you had cervical smears and proper checks done regularly, and you wouldn't need to be introducing poisons and vaccines, because that's what they are really. They're introducing an element of the disease, are they not?
Sorry, Neil, just to clarify, vaccines are not poisons. Vaccines are a synthetic way of doing what happens in our bodies every single day of the week. We are exposed to different organisms in our environment, and we become immune to them as part of that. So if we develop something like chickenpox or measles or whatever, we develop immunity to it. Vaccines are simply a way of doing that in a controlled manner. So vaccines are not poisons.
But are they not? No, I mean, you're the medical man, but are they not kind of like a diluted version of the disease itself?
No. For example, if we use the HPV vaccine, what has happened there is a number of specific proteins that the virus makes have been identified. They've been purified and they're put into the liquid that is instilled into people. There is nothing live in there. There is nothing from the organism itself. It is proteins that were originally identified and then were cultured and made by a completely different process. So vaccines are not poisons, and it is highly inflammatory and inappropriate to use that kind of terminology. 80 million people, mostly women around the world, have had this vaccine. Every single one of them.
No, listen. I'm not disputing what you're saying, and I'm open to correction if you tell me that a vaccine doesn't introduce some of the disease itself. You're saying that it doesn't, even if it's manufactured in a lab, it doesn't have aspects of the disease.
No, it has in the case of the HPV vaccine, and there are a variety of different types of vaccines. In the case of the HPV vaccine, it is a couple of the proteins that are expressed on that virus that have been taken out, have been engineered, and are then produced.
But doesn't that make it part of the disease then?
No, it simply doesn't. It is a protein that is identified. It is not a living organism. It cannot cause the disease. It is simply a very small fraction, a piece of protein that virus typically makes, and that is taken out purely for those safety reasons. Exactly what you say, that if one put in the virus, perhaps there is a concern that the virus itself could cause problems.
But wouldn't it be as effective, or maybe more effective, without having to introduce vaccines? To have smears instead?
Sure. Okay. So we have a very effective smear campaign in Ireland. It's very well integrated in the community. It's been running very successfully each year. Even with that, 300 women each year will develop invasive cervical cancer. They will undergo horrific treatment, very difficult on a number of different levels, and 100 of those die. Those are the facts here and now today, with an effective smear and screening program in place. This vaccine would simply prevent those women from getting the infection that causes their cancer in the first place. It is part of a process. Vaccination is simply a mimic of a natural process that happens to us every day that we are alive. Okay,
so with that in mind then, and let's say that the actual vaccine is successful and it is effective, and put that aside then, right? Because that was never really the issue anyway. The issue was the side effects.
Sure. Every vaccine, every time we stick a needle into our bodies, there's a potential for side effects, whether that be MMR or whatever the vaccine might be. And typically what the vaccine tries to do is it tries to say to the immune system, this is something that you need to recognize. If you see this again, you need to target it and you need to kill it. So whether that might be measles virus coming in or the human papilloma virus, the HPV virus coming in, that you will target it. So what it does is it switches the immune system up, makes it very active. And one of the typical side effects of that is pain and sometimes flu-like symptoms. These do occur. I've been vaccinated for a variety of different things in my life, and I've had those kind of symptoms. They don't occur that often, surprisingly enough. Usually the biggest impact is pain at the site that the injection goes. And I mean, that happens with any needle that you stick into the body. And most folks that have it have virtually no side effects. Certainly some people do have side effects. Some people, depending on how active they are afterwards as well, there may be nausea and vomiting on very rare occasions. But typically, the injection is without consequence. Can I give a very personal example? And I think it's time to put my money where my mouth is. And I wouldn't normally bring in family matters, but I've asked my son for his permission. I had my son vaccinated with the HPV. That is my confidence in this vaccine. And we do need to move to a gender neutral, to where boys and girls are vaccinated.
All right,
he had this vaccine. And afterwards, he had a little bit of pain in his arm. He didn't even have a temperature, and that was after he got each of the shots. Didn't notice it afterwards. I asked him that evening, and that is typically the impact that it has for people. And yet he will be immune from HPV infection. He will never get genital warts. It's a nice possibility, no matter what he does. He will not be at risk of developing a variety of HPV positive cancers, and he will never give HPV to a female partner.
Yeah, I know that Regret, the organisation that's put together by families whose children have been affected a lot worse than you're describing here, because you talk of, I mean, the HSE gives out some of the possible side effects, mild ones, pain, swelling, headache, dizziness, nausea, or maybe even a mild fever. But Regret talk about a lot more serious side effects, including memory impairment, concentration problems, difficulty multitasking, taking and retaining information, self-harming, suicidal thoughts, antisocial behavior, autoimmune illnesses. They could talk about joint pains, chest pains, breathing problems, palpitations, sensitivity to light, chronic fatigue syndrome, where their children just want to sleep all of the time. Are they unfounded?
No, and you know, one point that must come across strongly: these children are ill, they are sick, and there's no question about that. And I think some parents feel very isolated when this happens to their children. They feel that no one will believe that their children are sick. So there's no question, firstly, that these children are sick. Is it caused by the vaccination? No.
But hold on a second, Robert.
Sorry,
it happens
Neil.
Immediately after the vaccination.
Sorry, Neil. Now, you yourself on your programme last month, had a young man who rang in, who had all of the symptoms that you described and was having a very, very difficult time. He was in a fairly bad place, although hopefully he was recovering from it. He'd never had the HPV vaccine. Most girls who get the HPV vaccine also get the Tdap vaccine on the same day. And yet people are saying that it's the HPV vaccine, even though on that same day they will have gotten multiple vaccines. When we do the numbers, when we take all of the cases of all of these illnesses have been happening before vaccination, they're happening through vaccination, and they happen afterwards. The immune system matures over the teenage years. And unfortunately, in a small percentage of children, they develop a variety of immune conditions. Now, if the HPV vaccine was causing all of these things on its own, if we compared vaccinated with unvaccinated children, we would see a clear increase in the numbers of those vaccinated. I'm sure you can see the corollary there, that HPV vaccine should lead to an increase. That simply doesn't exist. All of the major global health organisations have done the analysis. In Ireland, we've had over 200,000 girls vaccinated. In the world, over 80 million people have been vaccinated, and every one of those cases have been examined. And they've looked at what happened in those people versus unvaccinated people, and they've simply found no difference in the rate of these illnesses. So these are real illnesses, don't get me wrong. These parents are dealing with a horrendous situation. It is the single worst nightmare that any parent could have. But the vaccine is safe.
Are you saying to me then that it is an unfortunate consequence or side effect, if you like, that their children would be suffering these things as a result of having a vaccination the day before or 2 days before? That, you know, this is some of the collateral damage we must expect, is it? And that's acceptable for the bigger picture? Is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that people develop these conditions, unfortunately, particularly in the teenage years, both boys and girls. And as I said, you illustrated this yourself with the young man that you had on. He had never been vaccinated for HPV, but yet he had these conditions. These conditions exist. These are not kind of collateral damage or anything like these. These conditions exist. The immune system in a teenager is maturing, and unfortunately, in a very small number of cases, the immune system can turn against itself. That is not particularly associated with the vaccine. And as I said, if you just
wait. It happens after the vaccination.
If you take the large numbers, if you take 200,000 girls getting HPV vaccination in Ireland, and if you consider that age group is very likely, likely more likely than any other age group to develop some of these conditions. Sure, you're going to get some people who develop these conditions around the same time as the vaccine. Some will develop it months, if not years afterwards.
No, this is directly after. Are you saying that's... I just need you to be very clear about this, because I want to be fair. And right now I'm finding it incredulous what you're saying. So I want you to be very clear. This is happening days after the vaccination. What are you saying about that?
That the HPV vaccine is not causing these illnesses. These illnesses are conditions that develop in these children.
Why is it banned in Canada?
Well, there are a number of countries where HPV vaccine, and there are a couple of different kinds of HPV vaccine. The vaccine is not banned in Canada, it is not banned in Denmark, it is not banned in Japan. If we take, for example, Denmark as a European neighbour is often shown up as and used by various groups to sort of showcase concern over the vaccine. In Denmark, all of the medical community there indicated their support for the HPV vaccine, but unfortunately the government listened to a particular group there that had serious concerns. The Danes are considering bringing back the vaccine. When you look,
so it is banned in Canada or in Denmark.
Sorry, it's not banned. It is not part of a national vaccination program, but it is in no way banned. The vaccine is safe.
So it's been withdrawn? No, but let's be clear about this. It's been withdrawn in Denmark because of health fears.
Unmedically qualified health fears, where a group of individuals...
But your parents aren't medically qualified, but they still know their children.
They know their children, but there, as I said, has been an unfortunate misinformation that the HPV vaccine is associated with that. And if one simply weighs up the numbers, if you had a child and you could give them a medicine that would stop them getting a form of cancer, and that's ultimately what this comes down to. I often hear when I go on radio interviews, and I'm sure you've heard it before, that the pharma companies have the cure for cancer. I'm sure you've heard that, Neil. It's a very common thing on social media.
Well, yes, of course. There are conspiracy theorists, and I'm not saying that I am or aren't amongst them, but I certainly do believe that with all of this, there is a financial aspect to it, as always, with pharmachem and pharmaceutical.
Here's a pharma company that is potentially providing an injection, 2 or 3 injections, depending on the type of vaccine, that will prevent a form of cancer and that will prevent that from coming back. In a way, isn't that the cure for a particular type of cancer? And that is ultimately what we're looking at. We're looking at preventing our children from having to worry about things like cervical cancer, head and neck cancer, and a variety of other cancers. That is really what parents have to weigh up in their minds.
Okay, hold on. I need to take.
Facts show that this is safe.
I need to take a commercial break. I'll come back after the break, talking with Dr. Robert O'Connor, head of research at the Irish Cancer Society, and lots more besides after the
Red FM.
Alrighty, as you probably gathered, it's coming up on 11 o'clock, and I'll come back with Dr. Robert and indeed Don after 11. Don was one of the original fathers who was on to me, who believes that his daughter got sick because of the vaccine for the Gardasil vaccine, I should say. Why is it that HSE will not and has not engaged with the 330 sick girls to investigate what is making them so sick? 21 side effects, some adverse and life-changing. And since receiving all 3 shots, my daughter has been robbed of the best years of her life. It's time this vaccine was stopped and a full investigation carried out, says Lee Kilroy. There are others like that. I also see a text and an email saying, can't come on air, but my daughter received the vaccine last week. This has really started to worry me. After listening now, she is completely drained and sleeps all of the time. It's interesting because this is vaccination given to all girls in first year and in second year. And it's given, I believe, in 3 doses, something in the region of 178 million doses worldwide. We'll pick up on it, but our lines are open on 1-850-104-106. Lines open on 1-850-104-106. We have Dr. Robert O'Connor from the Irish Cancer Society for another few moments. But just ahead of that, before we wrap with him, Don is one of the fathers who originally contacted me this time round, because this is an issue I've dealt with on a number of occasions in the past. And as a broadcaster, I just can't ignore calls, emails, texts, or communication from families and parents who are worried about their children. It would be irresponsible not to talk about it. Don, good morning. The symptoms that you described in your own daughter, you have spoken with many other parents who have had similar situations with their children after the vaccine.
Neil, I spoke with a parent yesterday morning, and I'll tell you something. It was heartbreaking to listen to that parent, where the child actually goes into seizures, where the child locks up. If you saw the child will just be getting ready for school, and the next thing is everything stops up. She can't move her hands, she can't move her mouth. Everything locks up 5-10 minutes, and you just have to wait, and it wears off and back to normal again.
And that wasn't happening to her before the vaccine?
No.
Okay.
No,
right.
I mean,
okay.
This is where we're highlighting the,
all right. And,
the risk concerns.
Okay, Robert, are you still there?
I am indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to respond to any? These are real life stories from real people.
Absolutely. And firstly, parent to parent, can I say, Don, my heart goes out to you. This is a horrific situation for any parent to be presented with, to have a sick daughter like that. And it's reassuring to hear that Natasha is climbing back up to health. I guess
not with the help of traditional medicine, mind you. But anyway, yeah.
Neil, to be fair, actually, most of the children as they go into adulthood actually do start to recover. Most of the children that develop these immune illnesses do recover. And there is no evidence for any of the unconventional alternative treatments having any effect. But let's move on from that one. As Don himself said there, really what's happening is something is happening to these children, and there's no explanation because of the variety of different symptoms and everything else, and it's hugely worrying for parents, and that's really the crux of this problem. These things have been happening for periods of time long before vaccination.
But that's I'm sorry. This is incredible. It happens after the vaccination.
It happens in teenagers. It has been happening before the HPV vaccine was ever introduced.
But it happened within 24 hours of the vaccination.
It happened in males who currently aren't vaccinated. And again, I'll go back. You had a young man on your program who had never been vaccinated.
Why do you keep on peddling that one story? Because you're not a spokesperson. You're not a spokesperson for Pharmachem, surely.
No, I'm not at all.
Right. So why can't you see that? I have to cover this story because parents are reaching out. It's happening after the vaccination is given.
Neil, more than 200,000 girls in Ireland have received the vaccine. Were you to get a text or a call from every one of them, I think it would illustrate the kinds of numbers that are involved, the kinds of safety that these vaccines actually have.
All right.
The fact that children develop these vaccines, develop these conditions is truly, truly heartbreaking. But the vaccine is safe, and it prevents against a preventable form of cancer.
So are you saying that Natasha would have got what she got anyway?
Yes.
All right. How about that, Don?
Well, we had a meeting with the HSE since I spoke to you last, Neil, and it's re-emphasising, I suppose, what I'm hearing. I'm astounded to hear that the HSE would tell us that it is a coincidence or that it is adolescent syndrome or symptoms. No, when I questioned that, I asked, I was told that this was always happening. I said, fair enough. I'll take anyone at their word. Show me the stats. And I have yet to see the stats.
Okay.
And when I ask, and to be honest with you, Neil, I have very good friends in the medical profession. When I ask them in regards to stats on this, they ask me, what am I talking about? So
that's not directly the point I'm asking you. It would have. They're saying, or at least the Irish Cancer Society are saying, is what happened to your daughter would have happened anyway. The vaccination had nothing to do with it. Even though the timing is questionable, you don't believe it. Robert, have you heard of this Dr. Dahlberg, the ex-pharma industry physician with Gardacel's manufacturer Merck?
I have heard, and actually, again, this is a misnomer, because when people actually investigate this individual, he never seems to have been in the employ of the company.
All right.
So this is a myth that has been propagated around.
So it's a myth that he ever said that it will become the greatest medical scandal of all time. Is it a myth that the vaccination includes aluminium, which can go straight as a metal product to your brain?
Neil, can I ask you a personal question? Did you put deodorant on under this morning?
I did, thank God.
Do you know that there's a 12% aluminium concentration in your deodorant, or maybe 1.2%? It's quite a high amount of aluminium. in your deodorant? Did you maybe eat from an aluminium pot yesterday? Maybe you had a nice dinner or something like that. Aluminium is in our environment. The amounts that are in that vaccine are absolutely minuscule, and they do not have an effect on the body.
Okay, well, listen, I'm trying as much as I can to balance these. There are always two sides to every story.
Absolutely, Neil. Absolutely.
And I hope you've had an opportunity to cover it as best you can. There was an article in the Washington Times saying that 5 million has been paid out to 49 families of Gardasil victims. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Why would they pay out that kind of money to families if it was safe?
But the vaccine is safe. I mean, the numbers of people, as I said before, 80 million people have received the full vaccination around the world. And Don was talking about evidence. Each of those cases of vaccine have been investigated. It's been an examination of the rate of these adolescent immune problems. And there's a variety of different conditions, some of which you haven't even mentioned. There are a number of other ones as well. And there's no difference in the rate of these illnesses between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated children.
Yeah, but they'd hardly have paid out then millions to families affected by Gardasil. I mean, there's another 200 claims have been filed with the Compensation Board in America regarding Gardasil, and the manufacturers are indemnified by the American government against. So it's actually probably America is paying out the money because Merck don't have to.
But I mean that happens with every product that is sold in the world.
But is that acceptable? Is that acceptable? Is it acceptable that there would be that kind of collateral?
But think about it, Neil. Car manufacturers pay out insurance claims all the time for things that happen.
But that's not good enough for the parent of a child affected by it. If they're the 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 5,000. Often
these cases are done on a settlement basis, so there's never any proof. There's never even any proof accepted that the cause in these cases was actually the vaccines. These are simply legal payouts, as happen all the time in medical legal issues.
All right.
There's no indication of any acceptance that the vaccine is unsafe. And again, I said, think of the numbers. Think of 80 million people and the numbers and the data from that. And there has been no association found. That's very, very strong evidence. And we want to prevent cancer.
Okay, appreciate that.
That's
Much obliged.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
A preventable form of cancer.
All right, I'll come back to it again, undoubtedly. Thank you. Okay, Robert, cheers. He's under pressure for time now. Much obliged. Dr. Robert O'Connor, Head of Research at the Irish Cancer Society, and Don, father to Natasha. Our lines are open at 1850 104 106. You can also text 0868 104 106. Again, it's all about information, and it's all about making up your own mind, and it's all about being informed. There's only so much that I can do, and there's only so much information or conversations that I can have. It would be a good idea for people with young children to also do their own research and to get online or get researching before you make the decision.